Hello, everyone. It's your boy Terrence here with Hollywood Already Did It, and I just came from the theaters from watching Shaft 2019, the new film from director Tim Story, starring Samuel L. Jackson, Jessie T. Usher, and Richard Roundtree. And after the jump, I'll talk to you all about it. All right. All right, so Shaft 2019, and I'm using the timestamps because none of the Shafts have different names. They're literally just called Shaft, 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 except for the two sequels from the Richard Roundtree era. So I'm using years as the timestamp. So Shaft 2019 is this sequel, hybrid, remake, reboot of the Shaft franchise that I would say leans more into comedy than it does anything else, and will how you feel about that will decide on where this movie falls into your range. Okay, so let's start off with my likes. First off, Samuel L. Jackson is fantastic in this movie. He and Regina Hall, truthfully, are both great, but Samuel L. Jackson has a lot to play with. He gets to kind of just go be big. We get to see more of the lighter side of Samuel L. Jackson from the Shaft 2000 in this version than I think we could have possibly even imagined. This trailers don't make it seem like that. This seems like it would have been more Jesse Usher's story, but I feel like Samuel L. Jackson gets a lot to play with, and Regina Hall has some great moments, both comedic and drama-wise, that I think she nails. There's a scene in the bathroom that I think Regina Hall is perfection at. And there are moments with the two of them and their chemistry together that really works well for this film. What I also really like is that this movie finds a way of intertwining the lore of previous Shaft, specifically Shaft 2000, because that's who the primary basis of this is. Specifically Shaft 2000, they intertwine the years that movie happens with the rest of this film in 2000, and it kind of all blends together. There's some callbacks to people that showed up in that film, and there's actually even a line that completely erases something and retwists something that happened in that movie to make it retrofit for this movie. People are going to feel one way or the other about that. I didn't particularly like it, but I didn't like that part, and I won't spoil it for you, but I do think it fits in with what they're trying to get with the lineages of the Shafts in this movie. The other thing I really like is that they lean hard into their R rating. There's a little bit of brief nudity in it. There's a lot of cursing. I mean, if you're not gonna have Samuel L. Jackson playing Shaft, you're gonna get MFs out the wazoo. And I think the use of allows you to kind of just let Sam be Sam. Even Regina Hall, let them be themselves without giving them a little buffer. I think sometimes some movies get scared of rated R because they want a big box office. I think this movie does a smart job of Shafts are R rated. They're grimy and gritty, and this is kind of trying to stay in that same vein. Those are the things I like. The things I dislike are going to be a bit long. What I don't like right off the bat, at the very beginning of this movie, there's a joke that happens from a character. I'll say it's the FBI boss. That is very on the nose and very transphobic, and literally comes out of nowhere and never gets brought back up again. It's just a joke for the sake of making fun of of a marginalized group. And then there's an entire run of jokes that are homophobic consistently. And so I'm wondering, in the screenwriting process, did they think, ooh, the best way of jokes is to be homophobic and transphobic and not really do good comedy? Because if you actually watch this movie, you can definitely take the transphobic stuff out, but if you take the homophobic lines out, the comedy that they do that works, is still fine without that being in there. So I'm kind of questioning as to why was that a choice? You can go with this whole old age dinosaur coming up to the new age, but the way that they play that doesn't really fit as much. So it's a weird disconnect. I don't have a problem with non-PC comedy. Like, I don't need you to be politically correct. However, if you do choose to make fun of a group, you should also make fun of all the groups. You shouldn't just do that. And then I also think when you do that, you need to be smarter about it. The way that they did the comedy for the transphobic line and the homophobic run of jokes, one, not funny. And I think you can get away with having a homophobic joke or a gay joke if you're funny or if you're smarter in the creativity of where you get to it. The way that they do it is a very baseline comedy, and it just feels more than haha. Number two, it feels like this movie does a lot of things that are very generic in both terms of comedy and in form of action. The comedy in this, it seems like they are having a hard time trying to figure out how to merge Shaft, and that'll be my next dislike. But the comedy feels like it could be in any of the Tim Story films. It could be like a barbershop comedy or Ride Along, or even something like that Tim Story didn't do with Central Intelligence. It feels like those type of comedies as opposed to being designated comedy for Shaft. I mean, you do generic comedy like that with this world, it can be jarring, and it feels like you did not need to have Shaft be here for this comedy to exist. Like, this movie, for the most part, is a very clean looking shot movie that just happens to have Samuel L. Jackson acting a little bit like the Shaft that he was in Shaft 2000. And I feel like some of that comedy, you can either do that comedy and not have Shaft in it, or if you're gonna do it, lean more into the blaxploitation and calling out some of the problematic things that John Shaft did. And they do some of it, but a lot of the comedy is just done for the sake of being hip and new in comedy. I like the idea of comedy of like Shaft going into an Uber or a Lyft, or Shaft files not being up to date because he's not using a computer. Those work. The comedy where you're using Shaft versus the sexual orientation of people in today, and calling out the stuff like that, that's when it kind of is like, you can be smarter at the use of comedy than that. Also, to be a Shaft movie, you should have some more action in this movie. And this movie only has one action sequence, and it's very generic. It's shot poorly. It feels like this is a TV show or a TV pilot, the way that it's shot, with minimalistic action. And I think anything that has the term Shaft in it, if you go from Shaft 71 to the subsequent sequels, I don't really remember the television show much because I didn't watch it. But Shaft 2000, there are multiple action sequences that happen in those movies. This movie has one. So the term Shaft, again, comes off as feeling very generic in both terms, and the action is just not memorable or even shot well enough that when this thing is over, I remember jokes, which I think is what they're trying to go for, try to be a comedy. I don't remember action beats, and that struggles for me. Another thing that there's this odd blending or attempt to blend futuristic or present day Shaft stuff with old school Shaft stuff, and it doesn't mesh. There are moments when JJ's doing typing stuff and it looks very clean, and then you go to a shot of Samuel L. Jackson's Shaft, like shooting down or like looking, and you kind of get more of a rustic feel. Or even like the shot that's in the trailers where you see all three of our Shafts crossing the street with the red jackets. That feels like an old school style. But then you flip it around, and the very scene before that, you go into this high tech stuff. Some of this stuff doesn't merge, and I almost feel like this movie would have probably done a better service had you just made an old school film, like you've done a Shaft in the 70s, or even in the 2000s, kept it in that era as opposed to being so futuristic, because the things don't quite mesh out, and it's jarring. I think they also need to make a decision whether or not they are making fun of Samuel L. Jackson's Shaft, or if they are leaning into the coolness and the hipness of what Samuel L. Jackson's Shaft was. They're trying to do both, and in doing so, they do neither. My other issue is the JJ Shaft character, Jr., played by Jessie Usher. I don't think he does anything wrong, and what he's given, he does a good job. I know what he's going for. He's going for the whitewash, like you live in this world now, and your mom's taking care of you, kind of moved you to the suburbs, so you're now well educated. You're doing all of this stuff, so when you come back to the hood, you're kind of a fish out of water. I get all of that. That works. What doesn't work is I don't know who that character is as a person. I don't. I just know that he feels bad because his dad wasn't around. But I feel when this movie's over, I am more connected to Samuel L. Jackson's Shaft and Regina Hall, the mother of JJ, than I do anything that JJ does, and I think that's a disservice because I feel like this movie wants to be Jesse Usher and Alexandra Shipp's movie, and it doesn't feel that way, and that's a problem because now I have two leads and two co-leads, but technically that means I have four, and it's just a kind of a mess as to who I should be caring about. And I feel like at the end of the day, we'll probably never see Samuel L. Jackson in this role again. But that's the character that I care most about when all of this is said and done. My last issue is more of a marketing issue and a trailer issue, in that, slight spoilers, if you will, I will say this. The movie gives the majority of their time to Samuel L. Jackson and Jesse Usher. The trailers and posters and artwork and the way that they've been doing the press give most of their time to Samuel L. Jackson, Richard Roundtree, and Jesse Usher. And I will just say this. If you're going into this movie planning to see a lot of Richard Roundtree, you should probably pick another film. There's not a lot. He's in it. That's not a lie. But the level of time that he's in it is much smaller than what you would anticipate going in by all the material that you have been given. All that said, how do I feel about Shaft? Where does it rank? Quite honestly, I enjoyed it in the moment. It is way more reliant on comedy that doesn't always work than it is action. Without Samuel L. Jackson, this movie is probably utterly unwatchable. He is the heartbeat, and Regina Hall are the heartbeats of this movie. But I never need to actually see this again. So on the ranking scale of play it again, Sam, once is enough, or give me a time stone, one time is enough. It's not an awful movie. It's not the worst thing I've seen, but I also think it is very generic. And the biggest thing, it doesn't quite feel like a Shaft movie. It feels like a ride along with the, how can I say this? It feels like a ride along movie or a Central Intelligence movie with the skin, I'll use the skin for video game terms, of Shaft overlaying it. And I think you could have done this. You can do this, what they've done with this movie, with basically any property, but I don't think that makes it a good movie. So that's my thoughts on Shaft 2019. What did you guys think? Have you seen it? Are you trying to go see it? If you have, go ahead and leave your comments in the comments below. Let me know what you think about it. If you haven't, you can like, share, subscribe to the channel. Go ahead and ring that bell. Anybody who joins the channel, first 500 folks we get here will be the founders of the channel. And once we get to 500, I'll give somebody something nice for hanging around and letting everybody know about the place, okay? You can hit us up on email at hollywoodalreadydidit@gmail.com, or you can find us on Twitter at HollywoodADI. We also have a podcast by the same name on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, anywhere that plays podcasts. This last episode, we talked about Dark Phoenix, and I believe this weekend we're going to be talking about the new Men in Black. So if you want to hear me talk about Men in Black, I won't be doing a review on the channel for that. We'll be doing an entire podcast about that one. But that's it, guys. Shaft is, it's okay. It's okay. But like always, I got my ticket. You got yours?